Hello, hello. Welcome back to Journal Entries. Today, we are actually recapping my journal entry, a recent one, around it being 1 year since freezing my eggs. That was a like monumental or just important decision and time in my life. And any moment like that, even like birthdays and holidays, I feel like those times are easy just to reflect back. And so when it was 1 year, it was just this aha moment of, oh my gosh, what has happened in the past year? And so I started journaling on that. And I was really shocked that I didn't immediately think about things that have changed or what has happened in my life. There was really this one idea that came to me. And it was a really surprising realization that I had a few months ago, but it was weighing like the heavy on me. It took up my whole entire journal entry. What I never expected from freezing my eggs was that it would actually free me from wanting more kids. And so I'm going to get into all of that, but I know that I have a lot of new listeners. So I want to go into the decision to freeze my eggs just quickly and a little bit about that experience, and then tap into this realization that I had. I always had the vision of having 3 kids. That was probably because I was one of three. And just like how I grew up, I just pictured myself having 3 daughters and they were playing soccer and I guess they were mini me's. They were doing all the things that I did. Fast forward to when I had my son, I quickly learned that I needed to start standing up for myself and I needed to start just taking a stand on certain things in my life and how I feel and what I want and what I deserve. I have a whole episode on my divorce, so we are not going to go into that. I will link that in the show notes if you're interested. But I ended up getting a divorce when my son was 10 months old. That's not when it was finalized, but that was when my ex moved down to Florida and my son and I stayed in New York. So I have been a single mom with full time custody since my son was 10 months old. And it's been a lot of work, but healing and processing all of this has meant processing a lot of grief around what my life would have looked like or what I thought it was going to look like. For example, having 3 kids that were all daughters and by a certain timeline. And of course, life happens and things don't happen according to plan, especially because that plan of having 3 daughters was like when I was in high school. But by the time my son turned 1, I was already going through a divorce and I threw my son's birthday party alone. My parents were the ones that helped me blow up the balloons. I actually paused there because they did all of the balloons for me. Thanks, mom and dad. But they were the ones that were like there for me, not who was supposed to be my partner. And for some reason, I just pictured birthdays as like being this loving time with a complete family. And so the first birthday was a time of grief for me that I really had to process. And it took up a lot of time in my therapy sessions. And it was just something that I had to navigate alone. And another one that struck me was this past Christmas when my son was home with me and he was 4. And so this was the first year that he really grasped Santa and he was excited for him to come. And so I played Santa simply in that I put presents underneath the tree after he went to bed, and we put cookies out and I think carrots and a glass of milk. And so I ate the cookies, I had some milk, and I did all of that alone. And I didn't realize that I envisioned doing that with my partner until I was going through that. And so it was moments like that that I realized that I'm doing this alone. That playing Santa example was obviously a recent one. It was just a couple of months ago. But the birthday party example of processing that grief and having one child at the time did play a part in the thought of, do I want more kids? Do I want to create the opportunity to find the partner that I deserve and that, the lifestyle that I want down the road? It was also around the time where I was 35 or 36. And I thought, I do want more kids. I want at least two kids, maybe not three, but I'm actively not dating at the time. So I was like, if I start dating, it's going to be a little while until I like meet someone. Then we start deciding to have kids, and then we have the kid, and then all of this goes down, right? And so I hate the term biological clock, but as a woman, I was like, I think it would be smart for me to freeze my eggs and to preserve the quality of eggs, because I had researched, Dr. Google says that 36 is the time that our eggs start decreasing in quality. Actually, it's much before that, but 36 is like the time that, like, the last time. And so that definitely played a factor too. I also really liked the idea that if I were to freeze my eggs and use them down the road, that it would be a possibility to do genetic testing. Hemophilia runs in my family and I'm a carrier of it. And so down the road, knowing that I could do genetic testing around if my potential kid has hemophilia beforehand was really enticing. And lastly, I was hemming and hawing about making this decision and going through with it for many, many months. And finally, my friend Sam told me something that still sticks with me. She was like, if you don't do it, you'll always think, what if, and wonder if you had. Whereas if you do freeze your eggs, you'll never regret it. Even if you don't use them, at least you have them, so that if you do decide down the road, then you'll have them, and you won't wish that you would have done it. And ever since she said that, I was like, you're right. Yes, I love that security. So that was, like, I think the final straw where I just did it. I signed up for it and did it myself. And honestly, it was so empowering making that decision and doing it on my own. A lot of unexpected things happened though. The very first thing was when I started giving myself the shots. I was terrified to do this. I'm fine when other people give me shots, like the flu shot and whatnot, but giving myself the shots was unreal. And I had so much anxiety after I started giving myself the shots on day one. It was because I realized that the option was taken away from me to not go through with it. Because I'm like, I'm not going to do this, right? I already put a down payment down and I'm just not a quitter. I'm not going to start something and then give up. And so I already started. I'm going to follow through. And for a couple days, I felt so much anxiety, just feeling like I had to do this, that I was being forced to do this, that I didn't have any free will in this, which is, I also realized the nuance in it, in that I also chose 100% to do this. But journaling is what helped me through it. And what this is helps me through any anxiety that I'm ever experiencing. It's where I journal through the worst case scenario, come up with a worst case solution, and then the best case situation or best case scenario. And I realized that my worst case scenario, it wasn't stopping, it wasn't giving up, because that wasn't in the picture. And that's what was giving me the anxiety. So by just slowing down and asking myself this question, I realized that the worst case situation was me just having a bad experience, going into the hospital. And I actually did a whole other episode on egg freezing, so I'll link that as well. And I went way more into this. And the worst case scenario did happen in some aspect, but I journaled through that, and then I had a solution for it. And it just really decreased my anxiety around it. This is a technique that I use, again, anytime I experience anxiety, but also with my clients when they feel trapped in their circumstances or when they start to sabotage themselves. Because really, I was sabotaging myself. I could have talked myself into quitting and avoiding, which is my second sabotage pattern that shows up for me. Another thing that was really surprising for me was the physical recovery. That was way more intense than I had expected. I was just so focused on giving myself these shots that I was like, once I'm in recovery, that'll be a breeze. But that was a lot. I had to ask for a lot more help than I realized. And the day that I had surgery was a day that my son was sent home from daycare sick. So I had to ask my mom to pick him up from daycare, to go pick up his medicine. Actually, she also had to bring him to the doctors, pick up his medicine, and then bring him home. We were both just laying on the couch sick. It was a lot for me and him, and me to ask other people to come in for support. My aunt also had to come in and help out. My sister was helping. Everybody was helping out. And so I felt very vulnerable, needing support, especially when I'm used to doing it all, when I am the single mom that does it all every single day, 24/7. So here was the surprising shift, though. Once I started journaling through, wow, it's been a year. What has changed? I had this realization that while I had this vision of wanting more kids and wanting a partner that, I could celebrate birthdays with and feel the support and love and all of that, the desire to actually have more kids, now that I have these eggs frozen and preserved, kind of went away. Actually, it went away. I don't know if it's because now I do have the option, like I secured that option. It's available to me now. Or if it's just like releasing the need and it's not on my mind as much anymore, and like hemming and hawing and, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Is this going to be an option for me? But I no longer am interested in having a second child. If it happens, then it happens. And maybe I'll feel different when I do have a partner in the future. But at this point in time, there is so much peace in my current life. And it's actually opened up how I date. And I'm not even really dating right now, but anytime that I do, log on to a dating app, I no longer, I used to see the section that's like doesn't want kids or no kids or whatever. I used to see that and immediately swipe left or right, or whichever one is like not interested. I used to swipe that way. And now I'm like, as long as they're open to like existing kids, I'm fine with that. I don't need more, which is just so surprising to me because I never pictured myself with one child. And so I'm almost in a period of grieving having two kids and like being the type of woman that has one child, and what would my life look like with one kid? That feels so different, like in 30 years, having one adult child than multiple. Holidays feel different. So much feels different about that. But it's really opened me up, and there's a lot of peace from not forcing a timeline now. I think something else that plays a role in this is acknowledging the trauma that has come into play when Griffin was a baby. And I think I still need to work through this, honestly. There definitely was trauma, not just when my son was born, but that whole pregnancy was during COVID. So that alone, I didn't realize how isolating it was until I was being interviewed on somebody else's podcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, I went to every doctor's appointment alone. I also had to deliver in a hospital 2 hours away. And I was driving up to that hospital 2 hours away, there and back, all by myself. Not that I didn't have a supportive husband at the time, but it wasn't like very supportive. I was doing a lot on my own, and I never acknowledged that. I always just assumed that that's what support was. But then once I actually had my son, and then moving home and going through all of that, and then getting a divorce at 10 months old, and then being the only one to raise him, there's just a lot to unpack there, as you can probably tell. And so I think about that with a future kid, and there's resistance there. I don't want to go through that again. And as my son is getting older and things are getting slightly easier in different ways, it's just I can see things from a different perspective. And so it's just such a surprising shift within this past year from I'm freezing my eggs so that I can use these and have more kids in the future, to I have these eggs frozen for the future if I want them. And at this point in time, I don't think I'm going to be using them. It's allowed me to loosen my grip on control and perfectionism. Even during the process, they tell you to do your injections at the same time every day, but really they give you like an hour window. So as long as you do them within the same hour, you're good to go. But I went from needing to do them at the same time every day. I was like, I need to do them at 6:30 every time. When Griffin is in the bath, that's when I'm doing them. And throughout I think it was like a 10-day span, I eventually was like, you know what? It's okay if I actually do it within the hour. You know, things will be fine. And it was. I also felt like the recovery process taught me to go from this overachiever in me and trying to bounce back right away. I remember feeling really fit and healthy before going through the injections in the process of egg freezing. And they tell you, like, basically don't work out or do very minimal movement because your ovaries get massive. And it's just a different feeling. You're like bloated this whole time and you want to listen to your body. And so I was like, well, after recovery, I'm going to jump right back into my lifting program and I'm going to get super fit and super lean. And that was the moment, March of last year, where I didn't. I continued to listen to my body. And I had so much more compassion for my body and for myself. And I started to reimagine what self-care looks like and what wellness looks like and what it feels like to me. So I went from this overachiever, just doing what I always did, to feeling so much more peace and questioning what I did to align with what I actually wanted to do and what felt right for me in this era. And lastly, I feel like it helped me a lot with restlessness. Restlessness is like, that feeling of jumping from thing to thing. And in this instance, I was thinking of like the next kid, the next relationship, the next birthday party, what that was going to be like. And it's allowed me to focus on what's in front of me, how happy I am with my son right now and being so present. Something that I preach a lot lately is that time doesn't have to fly by. You always hear moms talking about how time flies by, especially once you have kids. You blink and they're teenagers. You blink and, the holidays are over and you don't even remember any of it. And it's all a blur. My son is only 4, so I can only speak from birth to 4. But as a single mom, being in charge of everything, it would be so possible for me to be so overwhelmed and so overstimulated that I'm just so caught up in it that I miss everything, that I'm just always busy and on autopilot trying to get to the end of the day. But instead, since day one, I have been so present and peaceful through it all. And there have been hard days. There were seasons for sure where literally every journal entry was, yesterday was hard in caps lock. That was mostly, or, if caps lock were handwritten, that was mostly when I was co-sleeping with Griffin when he was 2 years old. So there have been hard days. That's not to say that. But I don't feel like time has flown by. I feel like I can pinpoint specific days from every single year. And it's an amazing feeling to feel that way. And I want that for all of the moms in my life. So, in closing, this experience of egg freezing, and especially having a year to grow from it and just to have new thoughts and perspectives from it, has made me realize that letting go of our sabotage patterns, like controlling, perfectionism, avoiding, people pleasing, restlessness, all of these things, and even letting go of how tightly we try to secure the vision that we have, it allows us to open up our world and to even feel more present, to feel more peace, to live in the life that we're currently living. I invite you to journal on that if this is resonating with you, to journal on or simply reflect and think through where you might be holding on super tightly to plans or timelines. And what might happen if you loosen that grip? And there might be some grief with that. There will be some grief that you'd have to process with that. But what could be on the other side of that? And speaking of letting go of these patterns that don't serve us, or these patterns that feel really hard, and or these decisions that you've been hemming and hawing over, you might even be hemming and hawing, and that is your sabotage pattern. Like myself, my self-sabotage detox program is open for enrollment just until Friday, March 7th. So if you're listening to this before then and you're interested in identifying what your sabotage patterns are and how they're showing up in your life in a way that is preventing you from being present and peaceful and actually pursuing your dreams and your goals. Sabotage is subconsciously what is running the show and keeps you on autopilot. It's what keeps you coming home from work and you're cooking dinner, but mentally thinking about what you didn't do at work that day and thinking about the next part of your kid's nighttime routine and also drafting an email in your head for the next day. It's knowing that you want to start a hobby like gardening or painting again, but knowing that you kill plants anyways, or you are going to paint and you know that you're going to stop, and so you don't start anyways, and you sabotage your happiness by not even starting anything. Working through these things in real time will allow you to be more present with your kids, be more present with yourself, wake up feeling more inspired, and get out of the daily overwhelm that you get sucked into. And also, life will slow down for you. And it's such a beautiful feeling. So if that speaks to you, click on the link in the show notes for more information. I would love to have you in there. Also, it's capped at only 6 spots. So check it out if you're interested. Thank you for tuning in. Feel free to shoot me a DM over on Instagram. I would love to hear if any part of this resonated with you. Even if you've also been through egg freezing or IVF, if you're thinking about it, feel free to ask me any questions. I love talking about this stuff with you and just sharing my experience with you. Thank you for tuning in this week. Check out the 5-minute journaling with me on Thursdays, and I will see you next week.